Hi, I'm Eric Schneider with MRC-TV, and joining me today is former NFL tight end Benjamin Watson. He played for the Saints, he played for the Ravens, and he played for my favorite team, the New England Patriots, at the beginning and the end of his career. Benjamin Watson, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Ben, first of all, it's the coronavirus. People are self-isolating. I know you've still had to travel. Are you staying safe? And what's your take on all this and people having to do this self-isolation?
It's unprecedented, honestly. Obviously, it's unprecedented. I can't think of any point in since I've been alive that we've had to deal with anything like this. So it's a new story every day. There's new things that we have to do and consider every single day. I think as parents, it's difficult because you have your children at home and you're trying to explain to them what's going on. A lot of times you don't know what's going on. So for us, one thing we've tried to do a lot is just be honest with them, kind of learn about this virus together, but also encouraging them and just telling them that, you know what, while we may not know what's going on, God knows. This doesn't catch him by surprise. And really trying to instill in them the idea of look, there's a lot of stuff we can't control in our lives. We've seen in 2020 people pass away that we didn't think would ever die, like Kobe Bryant. We've seen weather happen that we didn't think would happen. Now we've seen a virus that is kind of out of our control. So just really instilling in them just this idea of, look, while I may not be in control of everything, I know someone who is, and we have to put our faith and trust in that. But I've been at home. I was doing a lot of traveling before, but since then we haven't been doing much. The kids are at home actually for 2 weeks for spring break anyway, before we added on this whole thing with the virus. So we've been hunkered down at the house. The only time we've left is to go ride bikes around the neighborhood sometimes or go play in the backyard when the weather up here is nice enough, which, as you know, being in New England, that's not all the time, especially in the month of March. So we're doing all right, though.
Now, I have to ask you, a lot of people have said this is actually, in some ways, it's a good time to focus on family and focus on faith. Have you felt that things have grown in your family that way? I mean, you have quite a large family, Ben.
Yeah, I do. We are very, in this country and, probably around the world, it's very easy for us to ignore issues that we have with our spouses or our children, certain relationship issues. Now we can't do that. Now you're at home, can't get away, and you have to deal with whatever the problems were that you weren't dealing with before. And that's a good thing if addressed the correct way. That can be a really good thing. This I'm looking at this time as being a time where the family, which is the fundamental unit of any successful society, can be strengthened. The relationships between mother and father, husband and wife, between the children, between siblings from one to another. Yes, there will be times when, hey, we've been around each other a lot, we're getting on each other's nerves. But I think that those will pale in comparison when we look back at this time of kind of the breakthroughs that are going to happen in this country and the way that those bonds are going to be strengthened. So, yes, this is a time, I think, for strengthening family. Also, when it comes to faith, I mentioned it before, but, that's a vital part of our country, too. And I think that crisis seems to always drive us to that. We have to be careful, however, to understand that God is not a vending machine. When there's a crisis, we put a coin in there and hope that something good happens. He's still God in the good times as well as he's God in the terrible times. And because we live in the world, there's going to be a little bit of both. This is just the way things go on earth. There's going to be these types of issues. But I do think that, faith does sustain you in times when you don't really understand what's going on from a practical stance and from a medical stance. There aren't a whole lot of answers as to when this thing is going to end.
You, as an NFL player, have been outspoken about your faith. You've written 2 books, one dealing with racism under our skin, another one, The New Dad's Playbook, speaking about the importance of fatherhood. But both of them have also brought the issue of faith into it.
Yeah, of course, because, faith is not something that we carry alongside of us like a suitcase. Sometimes it's talked about in that way. How do you bring your faith into X, Y, and Z? Or how does your faith affect this and the other? And while part of that is true, your faith is at the core of your being as much as anything else is. And so the way I think about it is that Everything else is an outpouring of your faith walk. How you address racism needs to be an outpouring of your faith. How you address calamity and crisis needs to be an outpouring of your faith. How you address poverty, how you address success, how you address failure, how you address the unknown, how you address the political climate, needs to be an outpouring of your faith in the way you talk about certain things and in the hope you have that those things will be resolved. And so you never shy away, and I never shy away from the reality of racism in this country. It is a stain on us that has been there since the inception and is still very evident today. So you don't shy away from those things. But when you come from an avenue of faith, you understand that we all have issues that need to be dealt with. We all need forgiveness, and we all also need to work together to correct injustices that continue to occur. When it comes to fatherhood, you mentioned the New Dad's Playbook, which is kind of the what to expect when she's expecting for guys. That was my idea when that was actually my wife's idea to write the book. She said, "You need to write a book like this so that guys don't make the same mistakes that you do." and so together we wrote this book, and really it's because faith tells us that, you know what, fatherhood is important. Fathers are needed. We live in a country right now where, a third of our children don't have children. Over a quarter, between a quarter and a third of our kids don't have fathers in the home, and studies show that fatherlessness is linked to all types of societal ills. That's just the statistics. It doesn't mean that if you don't have a dad, you can't grow up to be whatever you want to be. That's true, but statistics show that dads are vital, and there's an idea that dads either can't do it or don't want to do it, or ill-prepared to do it. And so the whole purpose of that book was because we need to encourage men not only to be great dads, which I believe they can be and they need to be, but also to be great supporters and partners to the women that are having the children as well. So, for me, that all boils down to faith, because honestly, there are times when I don't want to be a great dad. I don't want to be a great husband. I don't want to be someone who engages with respect and empathy to other people. I don't want to do any of those things. I want to lash out. I want to do all that stuff. But it's my faith that tells me, you know what? You need to treat people with respect because they have human dignity that's endowed to them by their creator.
Well, you've been doing more than, you were an author as well as a tight end and playing in the NFL. And now you've officially retired. And now you're producing a film. And you're taking your faith and you're bringing it into the issue of abortion. And this is an interesting step for you, a documentary on the issue of abortion. I believe it's called Divided Hearts of America. And you actually went out, from what I understand, and sought out people that disagreed with you on the issue of abortion in the making of this production.
I did. Divided Hearts of America is the name of our documentary, and we're hoping to release it at the end of this year. This whole virus has kind of messed up a lot of things when it comes to that, but we're still shooting for the end of this year, into 2020. And the idea behind it was really in light of so many different laws that have been enacted, conservative as well as liberal, across the United States when it comes to the issue of abortion. There's been just a gearing up, a ramping up of chatter, of talk about what's going to happen, about the rights of the unborn, about the rights of the mother, all those sorts of things. And so as someone who cares about both mother and child, I wanted to kind of get to the bottom of this debate. What exactly is abortion? How did we get here? What's the history behind it? What are these laws and what do they mean? Who are the different players when it comes to this? So I went and talked to different people in the medical profession. I talked to people on Capitol Hill, politicians, lawmakers. I spoke with people in academia, professors. I spoke with historians. I spoke with people who have worked in pregnancy clinics that do not provide abortion, but actually promote life alternatives. I spoke with people who were pro-choice and who actually worked in abortion clinics, and some of them actually were present when abortions were performed. I spoke with mostly people who would consider themselves to be pro-life, although I felt it was vitally important to be with people who thought of themselves as pro-choice, because one of the things I believe that's missing in the conversation is, again, that idea of humanity and respect for humanity, whether you agree with them or not. And if you're
that's what makes a conversation.
Exactly.
That's what makes it not shouting at each other.
Yeah, and that's what we do a lot of. We do a lot of shouting at each other. We do a lot of, and again, this is a very emotional topic. There should be shouting sometimes. I'm not saying that shouting is totally wrong all the time, but what I am saying is that the condemnation that comes out of both sides a lot of times is not productive or fruitful. And so Divided Hearts of America really is a deep look at about 30 or 40 different voices that I've interviewed about this issue of abortion. And we're really excited about my findings, really excited to hear people's voices that are on the front lines from different angles when it comes to this. Spoke with many women who have had abortions, men who have been affected by abortion. Spoke with some abortion survivors. And again, just want to give a full picture of what I believe to be one of, if not the biggest, human rights issue of our day.
When you say a full picture, other than talking both sides, did you find that you changed any minds in the conversation? Was that the goal of the piece in your mind when you started working on it, or was it more clinical, let's say, and more just a unbiased reporting on this issue and hearing voices? Because I know you interviewed, Alveda King and Ben Carson, who are very outspoken in their pro-life stance.
Yeah, my goal in my interviews was not to change the interviewee's mind. I really just wanted to hear their reasoning for their position, wanted to hear their experience, wanted to hear their why, their story. Many people weren't always on one side or the other. For a lot of people, they became pro-choice or pro-life or in between or a mixture of the two because of certain things that happened in their lives or certain experiences that they've had. So my goal was really to discover. I wanted to discover. Now fast forward into the release of the film, of the documentary, my goal is for people to really look introspectively, for them to hear all these stories and hear all these facts that we've collected, and to either affirm their convictions, whatever side they may be, or to change them if they feel compelled to do so.
Did you learn anything on this journey? I
did. And in the film, I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit about what I learned. I learned that people are very complex. And I think that for me, again, I like you, I like to watch the news. I like to get my news fixed and everything. But a lot of times what we see is a 2D picture of any issue, just a 2D black and white issue of a picture of any issue. And what I learned is that there's a lot of color. There's a lot of complexity, even in people I don't agree with. And I think that that's what needs to be told, as well as having conviction as well. I'm not saying that conviction is wrong. I'm all for having.
You've weighted it. I mean, you've weighted it on the issues of race. You've weighted it on the issues of the importance of fathers in America and having fathers in America. And now you're weighting in the issue of abortion. I mean, you're going after some fairly divisive issues here, Ben.
That's the football player in me. In the locker room, we talk about all this stuff. And you know what we do afterwards? We go out and we go play and we work toward a common goal. So the one thing I've learned and I've enjoyed about being in the NFL is that as opposed to other occupations, or so that I haven't been there, but I hear that there's certain things you don't talk about. And that comes into the league as well. But, there are so many men that come from so many different backgrounds, so many different belief systems, and they are very vocal, many of them, that we engage in a lot of conversations that I think people would be really surprised that we're talking about that in a football locker room.
Now, I know you said things are delayed because of the coronavirus. Is there an expectation or a hard date for this film as of yet? Or
not a hard date. That we're shooting for the fall, the fall 2020. Yep. So we don't have a hard date yet. No.
And speaking of the fall, I got to put you on the spot. Everyone has Tom Brady going down south. I mean, someone who started their career and ended their career with the Patriots, but you've played for some other teams. You have some insight. We're all Patriots fans are a little upset about this.
And I understand why. He's only, the winningest quarterback ever. He's only had 6 Super Bowls, and I don't know, been playing here for 20 years. So it is totally understandable why not only people in New England are upset, people who are Patriots fans, but even people who just love football. I mean, he has done so much really for the game globally. People in other countries know the game because of Tom Brady. They may not know any other names, but they know Tom Brady. He really is an icon and is a timeless figure from here moving forward when it comes to the NFL and football. So I understand the pain, that people are experiencing. On the flip side, his legacy will never be changed here. And I say here, meaning I'm sitting in Boston right now. So when I say here, I mean here, and I mean in the NFL. He's nothing's going to change that. But I think that part of the pain is that something has come to an end. And for human beings, it's tough when things come to an end. It's tough when people pass away. It's tough when viruses come along that aren't expected and havoc wreaks because of something that's unknown. It's tough when we change jobs and occupations. It's tough when we retire from occupations. It's tough when seasons change. If you're like me, things coming to an end is hard, especially when it's been that way for 20 years, whatever it may be in your life. And so I think that's part of the grieving process that the football community is going through. But then there's also a beginning. There's a beginning of his time in Tampa, and I believe, and I know actually, that Patriot fans are going to support him because of all that he's done. I don't think him leaving here was bitter or anything. But there comes a time sometimes when, again, he was a free agent and you decide you want to try something different for you and your family. That was the conversation that we always had. I was like, hey, if it's the best thing, you do what's best for you and your family, especially in a business like football.
One thing I want to bring up before we go, you mentioned that you're still remaining in Boston. You mentioned family. Your family has a foundation that was involved with this film, the One More Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. In about 2009, I was about year 6 or so for me. First, when our first child was born, we started a foundation called One More, and the idea is spreading the love and hope of Christ to one more soul by meeting people's real needs, so food, clothing, and shelter, by promoting education, which is really important to my wife and I, both of us being graduates and understanding the power of education, and then also by just supporting other charities financially and with other resources, our time, talent, treasure, who are doing specific work globally as well as locally that we want to stand behind, whether that be lately organizations that combat sex trafficking or organizations that are involved in other justice initiatives that we've been involved with. And we are involved with this film, with supporting and funding this film because we believe that this is a justice issue, as I mentioned before. So, our foundation it really came from us wanting to leave a legacy. We have 7 children, and we want our kids to know that giving is important, that standing for what's right is important, that giving of yourself to other people and other causes is important. And every time we have some sort of event, lately we've been able to bring our oldest kids with us and have them involved. And I think that as parents, that's vitally important. It's also important to be able to connect people. So many people want to do something, they want to help somebody, they just don't know how and where to go. So our vision was to be somewhere, be a group of people that could connect others who had a desire with a cause that they could be involved with.
And you get to do it as a family, so you can't ask for much more than that.
Of course.
Ben Watson, fan of your work on the field, especially when you were a New England Patriot, I have to confess, and fan of your work off the field. We appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one.